Microsoft hit with charges by the European Union. What is it being accused of? That's coming up today on Business Matters. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here with me. I'm your host, Don Ma. Of course, today starting off with markets. The Dow slipped just a bit today, weighed down by retailers, for example, like Home Depot, Walmart as well, and Nike. And the Nasdaq rallied today thanks to tech megacaps like Nvidia, Tesla, and Google parent Alphabet. Now, Nvidia stock jumped nearly 7% today, and this is coming after a 3-session sell-off, actually. Investors now are waiting for the crucial inflation data. It's going to be out this week. It's the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, and this is, by the way, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. That's going to be out this Friday. We'll have analysis for you on that, so please remember to tune in for that. All right, as I mentioned in the beginning, the European Union's antitrust rampage looks like continuing here, now targeting Microsoft. This just comes one day after it charged Apple over similar concerns, both accusations carrying the possibility of gargantuan fines. Here's the story.
The EU is now targeting Microsoft over antitrust concerns. It says Microsoft illegally includes Microsoft Teams with Microsoft Office. Teams is a video communication platform that people use to collaborate. The European Commission says including Teams with other popular programs like Word and Excel gives it an unfair advantage. Microsoft faces a potential fine of up to 10% of its global revenue.
This is a money grab, a power-hungry money grab. That's it. When regulators see money and they want to shake it loose, they cannot wait to.
Financial analyst Vijay Marolia says the move will harm the EU in the long run because it drives away businesses. Businesses could leave because all of the regulations and the risk of potential lawsuits.
10% of a revenue stream? Revenue stream is not the bottom line. So the revenue is what you pay all the bills with. Well, what is to stop them from just not doing business in the EU?
The investigations began when competitors Slack and AlphaView complained about the software bundling. Both companies say they welcome the Commission's move. Microsoft President Brad Smith says the company will, quote, work to find solutions to address the Commission's remaining concerns.
All right, so this is also important today. Snapchat is working to make it harder for teens to be contacted by people on the app that they don't know. It's the social media platform's latest effort to stop the sexual and financial exploitation scam known as sextortion. So the new safety features include expanded warning pop-ups that appear when a teen gets a message from someone they don't share mutual friends with or have in their contacts. So teens will get a warning message if they get a chat from a user who has been blocked or reported by others who is from a region where the teen's other contacts aren't located. Snapchat says those are the signs that the person potentially may be a scammer. Also, the U.S. will be putting significant strain on its electric grid by 2030. A consultancy group estimates that data centers and electric vehicles will ramp up power demand by about 300 terawatt hours. For some perspective for you on that, that's equivalent to the electricity used by Turkey in a single year. So this would be on top of a bump in power consumption by people and businesses. Rystad Energy says U.S. electricity demand has been flat since 2010. But demand is accelerating with the race to develop generative artificial intelligence, and the firm expects solar and wind capacity to grow by the end of the decade to meet the increased power demand. Now, as well, a new study has found that the US dollar is still holding strong here as the world's primary reserve currency. So, according to the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomics Center, neither Europe nor the so-called BRICS countries have been able to reduce global reliance on the dollar. So BRICS include, of course, Russia and China, among other countries. And the Atlantic Council's dollar dominance monitor showed that the dollar continued to dominate foreign reserve holdings. And on top of that, trade invoicing as well and currency transactions all around the world. An international organization has been pushing to shift to other international currencies. Okay, moving on from that. looks like Americans, consumers, that is, lost some confidence this month. And the conference board said that its consumer confidence index dropped in June. The index measures how Americans feel about the current economic conditions and their outlooks for the next 6 months. Now, short-term expectations for income as well as business and the job market fell, but on the other hand, recession expectations pulled back. Fewer consumers reported that they expect a recession in the next year, and most economic indicators show that the U.S. economy is in good shape by historical standards, but there are still signs that growth is slowing. But the question here is the consumer in poor shape or is the consumer in good shape? Is spending going to slow down as well? Earlier, I discussed these very important questions with Mark Hamrick. He's the senior economic analyst at Bankrate.com. Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. So the million-dollar question here is, how is the consumer doing, right? So, of course, taking in the latest confidence report and as well as any data points beyond that, what do you think?
Well, I would say, first of all, we're looking at these measures of consumer confidence, the latest one being from the Conference Board, the other one that we get twice a month from the University of Michigan. And they're not faring particularly well of late. I think the consumer is facing a number of headwinds right now. Those include elevated prices, the result of the inflation that was quite off the charts going back a couple of years now, and of course, high interest rates. So you have high interest rates, high inflation, and a job market that's still solid but is not as strong as it was before. And so the ability of consumers to spend is not at the level that it might have been a while back before inflation started raising its ugly head, and that's expressed in the consumer sentiment measures. The latest reading, it was interesting because it came in a little better than expected, but the assessment of expectations or the future is really the most negative aspect of this, but the measures of their assessments of the present situation or the present remain fairly stable. And so there is a bit of I think, a sense of concern about what the outlook may be in the United States. And I think maybe some of that is just reasonable given the fact that we've had a long string of sustained economic growth, quarter over quarter, year over year. And the job market has only recently seen the unemployment rate rise to 4%, having had a very historic run of being below 4%. So if things have been pretty good, there may be a sense that things aren't going to be quite as good in the future. And then consumers are, of course, living the economy in real time. And the most recent measure of retail sales was less than stellar, reflecting all the factors that were just mentioned.
So on that point there, Mark, would you say there is consistency between all the data points that we've seen so far? Do all the economic indicators paint the same picture?
Never, Don. So, for example, we look at how the political views of Americans are sharply divided when it comes to the economy. Republicans are very sharply critical, by and large, of the economy, where Democrats would tend to be a little more forgiving. That's what the surveys indicate. And this is a little like cheering for one's favorite team in whatever sport you might choose, where Democrats are saying, well, President Biden's in office and he's the president we support. And Republicans, or those who would be supportive of President Trump, are obviously eager to see him return to office. And so I do think there's a lot of alignment of opinions about the economy that are more reflective of political grounding than is necessarily the case as what the reality of the economy is. But there really is something here for everybody with respect to both praise and criticism of the economy, because we're in this space where we see prices that are up somewhere between 20 and 25% since before the pandemic. Yet we've had a good run of economic growth in the United States and low unemployment. So where one sits amid all of that will differ from household to household. And of course, lower income, lower wealth households are more negatively impacted by a bout of inflation. And this has been a historically negative round of inflation that we've been through over the past few years.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your insight today, Mark. Always great to hear them.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for having me.
So it looks like Boeing just can't escape the spotlight here. So it's now moving to allay fears over the quality of its jets by buying key supplier Spirit Aeros. And this is according to a report by Bloomberg. The deal is now expected to be announced within a matter of days. It all comes months after a mid-air blowout on one of Boeing's 737 MAX 9 jets. Now Boeing is hoping that reacquiring Spirit will give it more control over its supply chain. The aerospace giant has blamed the company for sending it incomplete or perhaps faulty parts. So talks over the takeover had earlier hit a stumbling block over Spirit's work for Airbus. The European firm threatened to block any deal that saw Boeing making parts for its latest jets. Okay, heading on to break here. More than 20,000 Tesla Cybertrucks are being recalled. What's the issue and how is it being fixed? And as well, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway selling more shares of Chinese EV maker BYD. Its stake in the company is now down to just single digit. We'll tell you more when we come back. Stay tuned. All right, thank you for staying with me here today. Here's what else is happening today. A federal judge rejected a $30 billion preliminary settlement between Visa, MasterCard, and retailers. And the details of the judge's ruling have not been made public just yet. But in a memo, the court indicated that it would not be likely to grant final approval to the preliminary settlement without any changes. Now, the two credit card networks reached the proposed antitrust settlement with U.S. merchants in March. The agreement will lower swipe fees or interchange fees that retailers pay when customers make purchases using their credit cards. Now, China has as well approved the sale of popular weight loss drug Wegovy. That's according to Danish drug maker Novo Nordisk today. And the latest approval comes at a key point for Novo in the Chinese market. Its patent there on active ingredient semaglutide will expire in less than 2 years. Local drug makers have also raced to develop generic versions, and Novo faces competition as well from U.S. rival Eli Lilly. So potentially another setback for Tesla's Cybertrucks. The automaker has recalled its Cybertrucks in the U.S. over issues with their windshield wipers and exterior trim, and the recalls affect more than 11,000 vehicles. Also, Airbus will be announcing that it's going to revise its 2024 guidance over issues with its space programs and a reduction in commercial aircraft deliveries. And this includes a nearly $1 billion over poor cost and scheduled performance on a variety of satellite programs. Okay, we have some China-related stories for you today. A human rights organization is calling Shein's potential IPO on the London Stock Exchange a badge of shame. Amnesty International UK said this is because of the Chinese firm's questionable labor and human rights standards. Now, Reuters said that according to sources, that the fast fashion company has kicked off the process for its potential listing for later this year. And it said that the company filed papers with Britain's market regulators in June. Shein's plans to list on the New York Stock Exchange as well, also running into opposition over its labor concerns. And a deepening tech war is underway, apparently, between China and the U.S. A report has revealed that the Biden administration is investigating Chinese telecom firms, fearing that they could exploit American data. So what's happening here is sources telling Reuters that there are concerns with China Mobile, China Telecom, and China Unicom, and they could provide data to Beijing through their U.S. cloud and internet businesses. These Chinese firms have already been on the U.S. radar previously, and the FCC barred the companies from providing telecom services in the U.S. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has sped up selling its shares of electric car maker BYD. And according to a recent filing with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, Berkshire has reduced its stake to just under 6% of last week, as of last week. So about a week before that, its stake was closer to 7%, and the firm is close to the threshold where it will no longer have to disclose its share sales. Berkshire Hathaway started investing in China's largest electric vehicle maker in 2008. At the time, it owned a 10% stake. The Buffett-backed company started disclosing sales of shares about 2 years ago. And China's Huawei is leading smartphone sales in the country. Counterpoint Research says the run-up to the second country's largest shopping holiday in June, where Huawei sold about 42% more than a year ago. And this comes as Apple scrambles to regain market share in China's smartphone market. In April, Counterpoint reported iPhone sales fell by about 20% in the first quarter of this year. It then ran discounts on its products, and sales of iPhone are now up 3% for the period in May and June. Huawei's sales were reportedly driven by continued demand for its new 5G products. All right, moving on from China-related stories. So with rising personal debt levels, people's financial challenges are growing by the day. So our next interview is focused on how to achieve financial well-being. I spoke to Brian Kerna. He's a seasoned financial planner at Kerna Financial. We discussed topics ranging from accessing financial health and managing budgets to the importance of financial habits. Here's his professional advice. Brian, thank you so much again for coming on the show. It's been a while since we spoke, so I think everybody is wondering, to some capacity, this question. How do you determine if you're in good financial shape? Like, for example, what benchmark or indicators indicate that?
Yep, yeah, that's kind of the million-dollar question there, and thank you for having me back on the show. I think it does vary. You know, you want to keep things relevant to where somebody is in life, who they're comparing themselves to, if they're trying to keep up with the Joneses per se. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think what we'll discuss today are some different ways as far as net worth. You know, what is my standing if I look at all the assets I have, any of the liabilities I may carry, and then determine my net worth and then compare that to my peers. And then another way is to actually look at the cash flow and say, okay, how much is actually coming in the door versus how much is going out? And ultimately, I think that's the best one. If you look at, you have a sustainable source of income or earnings that's coming in and that exceeds what your normal expenditures are, then that should put you in a pretty comfortable position. It doesn't matter if you have millions and millions of dollars in the bank. If you say my lifestyle is X and my income is Y, and those are relatively fixed and that income's higher, then that can lead to a pretty comfortable financial position.
So is emergency savings, I mean, would that be a possible indicator of how well off you are in terms of financial health?
100%. Yep. And so if you're familiar with some of my planning process that I take all of my clients through, I use a very simple 4-step planning process. It's protection first, build liquidity, manage your debts, and then invest. All right, so we follow that order. It doesn't matter how many zeros are in your net worth. We never really deviate from that. So obviously the second one in there, top priority certainly, is liquidity, and that speaks to your rainy day funds. How much cash do you have readily available at any given time? What I always recommend to my clients is 6 months expenses, okay? So obviously, if we're a young professional just starting out, maybe we just bought a home, we got a new car, had a lot of different life events, those are all subtractions usually from our assets. So that might put us behind the 8 ball. But early on, especially as a young professional, building liquidity is a key priority. And I would say 6 months expenses is a great benchmark. If we're there, I'll tell you, you're better off than most. If you're habitually below that and you're like, man, I just can't get there, I'm starting to feel a little paycheck to paycheck, all right, that's where we know, all right, we've got some work to do before we could actually call ourselves financially healthy.
So how do you get yourself into that good shape? I mean, is it just mindset over anything else?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So it's really about discipline. Okay, so when people kind of complicate some of these, I just bring it down to basic math. All right, it's inflows and outflows. So if you say, I just feel like I'm on this treadmill, I don't feel like I can get to that 6-month mark that Brian's always talking about, all right, then either A, we've got to increase our income, maybe find another source of revenue, working some overtime, that side hustle, whatever it might be, or we got to look at our budget, excuse me. And lots of times when I sit down with clients, we really are not always that honest with our budget. And when we are, and we really document all the things that we're spending each month, we'll start to see some fluff there.
Well, all right. Terrific advice today, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And thanks again for having me.
For the food lovers out there, the annual Fancy Food Show in New York City is underway and is a chance for hungry foodies to sample the latest and trendiest food and drinks. NTD's Sean Marshall was there.
The Fancy Food Show in New York City is in its 68th year. The show's origins began in post-war 1950s America. Troops returning home from World War II came back with a taste for European flavors and products, like Dutch preserves and British biscuits. The food varieties evolved as American consumer tastes evolved. Today, the show hosts thousands of varieties from around the world with new types of fancy food creations and traditional favorites. This Japanese tea company is adapting to international taste by using Major League Baseball celebrity Shohei Ohtani to endorse their brand.
We think he's going to be a great ambassador, and right now we are doing a major campaign. We are in Times Square this month with a billboard with Shohei Ohtani and our Oyocha, which is our #1 selling brand green tea.
The three-day festival gives vendors a chance to talk business with influential industry leaders, food pioneers, and the press. This Jack Daniel's branded coffee drew some attention, and guess what? It's alcohol-free. The alcohol cooks away when you brew the coffee.
We're also the official licensee for Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey Coffee. So our coffee is really special. It's 100% Arabica coffee, and it's infused with real Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey. So you get those flavor notes and aromas of vanilla, caramel, maple charcoal, and that's all coming off of the Jack Daniel's.
When the event is over, there's still more work to do. Since 1992, the show's exhibitor food donation program brings about 300,000 pounds of food to those in need through the City Harvest program in New York City. They also donate items like furniture, household products, and construction materials to local nonprofit organizations throughout the New York region. Today was the last day of the 3-day summer event, but it returns again in the winter. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Thanks for that report, Sean. And with that, all the stories we have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback for the episode, please feel free to let me know. You can email us at business@ntd.com or just leave a comment online. I do read them. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.